traveling today made it back to be with us this evening, most all of them anyway. And just thankful for the time that we've had. I'm thankful that we were able to go. I'm thankful for everything that we got to do and to see and to enjoy with these kids. I hope they were as excited about it as some of us were, and I hope that we didn't seem to be too miserable in Dollywood yesterday for the kids. I told them last night, I said I felt like now I have a greater appreciation for cattle when you're working. When you get all them cattle together and you put them all in one big pen and then you start shoving them down and funneling them down and getting them into one little old chute right there, now I understand how they feel. I just I feel their pain now. It makes more sense to me now, but no, it was a good trip and I enjoyed it. But I'm thankful to be home. I thought about this, and that's where that most of this thought for this message this evening came from. As we were driving up the road today, I was thinking about how many times in my life that I have left these mountains here, and how many times in my life that I've been gone away, and sometimes for long periods of time. But I'll never get over coming back home and coming back to these mountains. I'll never get past that. I know the Smoky Mountains are beautiful mountains, and I really like looking at those. We had a tremendous view from the porch in that cabin. We were up there on top of that mountain, literally on top of that mountain. I wondered that first night if we were going to make it up to the top of that mountain or not. But we were right up there on top of the mountain, and it was just an amazing view. I looked at, I think it was maybe Bradley and me were looking at just as far as we could see out through there, and we were wondering just how far that was. And I don't have any way of knowing. It was probably 100 miles or something like that. I don't know. But I thought about that as we come up the road, and then I thought about being even further out west. And I've seen the Rocky Mountains, and I've been out there where it seems like you're going to get there in just about 30 minutes or so, maybe an hour. And 5 hours later, they don't look any closer than they were when you started. And I thought about being out in Texas, and I've said this a lot of times. I said, I don't know why the United States ever saw fit to fight a war over that place. I'll just be honest. They tell me there's pretty parts of that state. I've never seen those parts. I've been on both ends of it and at the top of it, and I still have not found the pretty place in Texas. But it's the same out there in New Mexico and Nevada and all the places that the Lord has blessed me to see. I've seen all sorts of places, and every time that I come back here to these Blue Ridge Mountains, I know that I'm getting close to home. And I've thought about that all the way up the road. I don't want it to sound like I didn't enjoy our trip. I did. And I go on another trip. It don't bother me at all. I think it was great. I enjoyed it, and it was good. But I thought about coming home, and I thought about the journey that we call life, and the things that we see in this life, and how that life really is a journey. It's just a journey that we begin as when we're born, and when we're real small, we begin this journey, and we keep going, and we keep moving forward to whatever in our mind the end of it is. And I've thought about this constantly, about how now there's a song now that says home is not where I'm from, but home is where I'm going. And I got to thinking about that and studying on that coming up the road, and I got to looking at some things here in the Bible. And if you want to turn to Nehemiah chapter 2, I'm going to read just a little bit there about a journey that this man was about to take, and some things that's necessary for a journey. And I found that the one thing that I've realized is necessary for a journey with me and my family is a bigger vehicle. We have determined that is going to be a necessary thing down the road, because I don't know that if it's against the law or not, but you are supposed to, I think, be able to see out of the vehicle. I think. I don't know, but anyway, but there are some things on a serious note that are necessary for a journey. And I started looking at some journeys, and the Bible's full of illustrations of people that had somewhere to go, and people that had something to do, and people that had a job or a particular or a specific reason for making a journey. And as I started looking at journeys and things like that, I thought about Nehemiah here and how that Nehemiah, I like to preach out of Nehemiah. I like the story of Nehemiah. I like what he stood for. I like what he did. And I like the fact that Nehemiah always had a purpose. Now, you know, I'm one of these people that if you're going to convince me to travel, there better be a pretty good reason for it. And there has to be a purpose for it. I mean, some people just like to travel just to go and to see what it looks like on the other side of the hill. Some people like to travel just because they like that. But as I've done mentioned to you, I've done quite a bit of that in my lifetime. And most of it I got to do through looking through a windshield. And I personally now, I don't want to go anywhere unless there's a pretty good reason for it. There has to be some sort of a purpose. And I thought about in our Christian walk, there has to be a purpose in our Christian walk. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I get so, I think it's funny how so many people just aimlessly wander through life. And they say, I used to really laugh about the ones that said they were trying to find themselves. And that was always funny to me, these people that were out here just wandering aimlessly through life while they were trying to find themselves. And you know, I'm just kind of got a little bit of a sarcastic tone to me. I said, well, I think we just go look in the mirror and there you are. And they said, well, that's not what I mean. I'm looking for a purpose. Well, the Bible gives us plenty of purpose. He said that in Ecclesiastes, he says, let us hear the conclusion to the whole matter, to fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It should be, for every Christian, it should be the purpose that we have is to simply serve God. It should be that is our purpose, that is our direction, that is what we're trying to do. But I thought about Nehemiah here and how that all of this came to pass. And I'm going to read here in chapter 2, and then I'll go back and give you a little bit of the background on this. But in verse 1 in chapter 2 of Nehemiah, it says, and it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid, and said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? Then the king said unto me, for what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, for how long shall thy journey be? And when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. Then I came to the governors beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. So the way this story begins In our text tonight there in chapter 2, we find that Nehemiah is asking the king if he can go back and make this journey back to Jerusalem. And what had happened there, and we find that Nehemiah was a cupbearer to this Persian king, and he was there, and in those days the cupbearer was also the taste tester. He was also the man that had much of the power of the kingdom placed upon him, because he had to be a man of some honesty and some integrity and all of that, because he was actually the last line of defense to keep the king alive. And so to find a place as the cupbearer for the king, on one hand it was a dangerous job, because it was his place to taste test all of the stuff that was given to the king, all of the wine that was given to him. And so had it been poisoned or something like that, yes, then Nehemiah would have died from that. But it was also a place of great prominence, and it was a place that had a great deal of responsibility there. And Nehemiah was a man that took that responsibility, and he took it very seriously. And he was talking about being sad before the king. Now the king in those days, he didn't want anybody around him that seemed to be sad or that seemed to have an issue or a problem. And so Nehemiah was pretty worried about the fact that he went there, and the king noticed that he was sad, and noticed that there was something that was weighing very heavy on Nehemiah. And so that's how this conversation got started, and it's how that the king found out, just like that Nehemiah did. Some friends of Nehemiah's had came and told him that the city of Jerusalem, the place of his father's sepulchres, are there where his fathers were buried. And you can go back and see how that goes all the way back through into the days of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and all of them. But we find that Jerusalem had just been laid waste. It was just there, and they hadn't anybody taken care of it. They hadn't taken care of the walls, and the gates of that city were falling down, and it was just in ruins. And so any of the enemy that come in there, any of these other men, this Sanballat and Tobiah and all them, if they wanted something from God's people, if they wanted to go in there and take something, there was nothing to stop them. There was nothing there to keep them from it. And so Nehemiah decided that if the king would let him, then he was going to go back and he was going to rebuild the walls, and he was going to put up the gates, and he was going to give that great city some sort of defense once again. And so that's how we come down to the place that Nehemiah is going to begin this journey, and he's going to go there. I don't know exactly the distance, but it must have been a great deal of distance for him to travel to get back over there, because he made mention of the fact that he needed some letters to be able to pass through the lands on the other side of the river, and he needed to make some provision there. And so we realize and we see in this, and in beginning any sort of journey, there has to be some direction for it. There has to be a purpose for this journey that we take. And as Christian people, we find that some Christians are just, it seems like they're just wandering aimlessly along through life, and they don't really have a great sense of purpose. They don't seem like that they're really trying to do a whole lot. They seem like, I like to say that we're just going along to get along, and we're just going down the road, and we're just taking it one day at a time, and just one step along this journey at a time. And we just seem like we don't really have a lot of purpose, and we don't have a lot of direction. And what I find is, in studying the Bible and knowing how God has dealt with my heart on some things, I know that there's a particular direction that He wants me to go. And I've realized that there's some things that even though I may not want to do it, even though I may feel like that I'm not prepared for that, or I may feel like that I'm not qualified for that, God has given me a direction. He's given me a place to go, and He's given me everything that I need to get there, but I have to be willing to go. And I brought that out just a little bit there Sunday morning, and after thinking back over it and going back over it in my mind, I know that sort of message, and I knew when I started it, but that sort of message is going to upset some people, and it's going to get some people, I hope, to think about some things and to examine themselves and see exactly where they are with the Lord. And I like to think about the fact that we also, as Christian people, need to examine ourselves and see what direction that God would have us to go. And I know that there's so many different things. I know that we're all on the same journey. We're all going to the same place, but there is different ways to get to that same place. You know, the disciples there in what we call the Great Commission, he says, "Go ye therefore into all the world and to preach the gospel." He said to go into all the world. So that means that if we're all going into all the world, we can't all be going the same way. We can't all be going the same direction. We can't all be doing the same things. We all have our own job to do. We all have our own specialty, and we all have to go and to give in to that, and we have to follow the Lord's direction for that. We all have a direction that we're trying to go, and He gives us that so that we'll know which way to go. Now, if you're here today and you don't really feel like you've got a sense of purpose and you don't feel like you've got any sort of direction, then I suggest that you get a hold of God and you simply ask Him, which way would you like for me to go? Now, I have realized some things in the last week. And I say this constantly when we have, I'm standing up here on Sunday morning and we have all the children to go back there, and I make this statement: you can put me in a church full of the most hardened sinners, adult sinners that you can find. You can put me out here on the street. It won't bother me nearly as bad. It won't scare me nearly as bad to deal with a bunch of adults as it does to deal with a bunch of kids. I have found and I understand I can talk to them and I can preach a message to them, and I can tell them about the gospel of Jesus Christ, but that's not my calling. That's not my place. That's not my direction. I'm thankful that in this church we have people that are far better suited for that than what I am. Now, I don't mind trying to help out. I don't mind getting them up here and telling them something. I don't mind it even with them high school seniors. It didn't bother me at all with them. But you give me a room full of 6, 8, maybe 9, 10-year-olds. Now I'm like a fish out of water. That's just not my calling. And I'm okay with that. And with the Lord's help, I'll get better at it. But that's not where I belong, I don't believe. There's some of you sitting here today that's exactly where you belong. That's exactly what you're good at. You can deal with that. You know, I've realized that. I've realized that most likely I'm probably never going to be put in the fanciest church in town with the biggest congregation and with all the pomp and circumstance. That's probably never going to be me. I'm probably going to mess that up before we ever get started. And I'm okay with that. But you can put me in a church full of just plain old common folks, and folks that love the Lord, and folks that want to worship, and folks that want to get a little closer to the Lord, and I'm just as happy as I can be, and I feel like I can be some help to those people. But we all have our own place, and we all have a direction that we need to go. And if you don't know what your direction is, I can promise you that there is a prayer that you can pray. You can simply say, "Here am I, Lord. Send me. You open the doors. You put me where you want me. I don't care if it's in children's ministry. I don't care if it's in a bus ministry. I don't care if it's in a music ministry. I don't care if your place ain't doing nothing but just standing back there at the door and greeting people when they come in. You've all got a place. We all have a direction, and we have to see and understand that in this journey we have to have a direction. When you get ready to go somewhere, Not many people set out on a journey not knowing where they're going. Not many people try that. Every once in a while, you can do that. Every once in a while, I wouldn't mind getting in the car and just taking off and just seeing where the road may lead. But for the most part, everybody that begins on a journey has a particular destination in mind. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When I began my journey and where I'm at, where I thought I was headed, and where I find myself today ain't the same place. There's a lot of twists, and there's a lot of turns, and there's a lot of forks in the road. And sometimes we may not end up where we thought we was going. We may not always end up where we set out to go. I went to a place to trim a horse there a while back, and just think about what the odds of this are. This woman called me up, said she had an old paint horse that was foundered and needed somebody to come trim his old feet. He is so sore he couldn't hardly walk, couldn't hardly get around. I said, yeah, I'll run down there and do that. So me and this other fella, we take off down there, and we go up through there, and I was putting that address in my phone. And for some reason or another, I don't know if I did it or the phone did it, but we switched the numbers. Two of the numbers were switched. We was on the same road, but we didn't end up in the right driveway. We pulled up this driveway, there stands an old paint horse, standing there reared back on his hind end and trying to get that weight off his front feet. I said, that old boy's with me. He said, well, we bound to be in the right place. That thing right there is pitiful. I said, but this don't sound familiar. I don't think this is where we're supposed to be. He said, well, it's got to be. Look at that horse. I said, I don't recognize none of this from what she told me where she lived. I said, there's supposed to be 2 more horses there. Let me call her and see. So I called her up. I said, have you got a red barn and a little old white building over here? She said, I ain't got none of that. I said, do what? She said, I ain't got none of that. I said, well, now what is your address? She told me. I said, well, that ain't where I am. And so we get ready to back up. She said, you need to turn around, come back down the road. I think I saw you come by. You got a white truck? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I seen you come by. I said, you need to come back down the road. We get ready to back out the driveway. That boy looked over at that horse and said, sorry, buddy, can't help you today. But I said, and then we get down there, and the one we trimmed wasn't near as bad off as that, and we left standing up there. But I found out that I might be close, but we might not always end up where we're supposed to be, or where we think we're supposed to be. And that's the way it is serving the Lord. I had it in my head that I was going to be in a way different place than where I'm at. But because of just following His GPS, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We got to have a direction. We got to have somewhere that we're going. And so we know that Nehemiah, he was going back to Jerusalem. He was going back over there. No telling how long he had been gone, but I feel like that he thought when he started that way, he was going home. And so he goes over there. The second thing that we find, when you're planning a journey, planning a trip, you have to know the distance. You have to have some sort of an idea on how far it is to where it is you want to go. Now, what we found this week is you've got to know exactly how far it is, because you've got to know how much gas to put in the vehicle. You've got to know all these things. You've got to have some idea about the distance, and you also have to have an idea of how far that you're willing to go. Now, I was out there in them western states, and we was driving and driving and driving and driving, and we thought, well, we know how far it is up there to this place or to that place. But if you go out there, I'm going to be honest with you, we drove through Nevada one time. For about 2 weeks straight, we went up through there every day. You can drive as fast as an M915 big green Army tractor and trailer will drive for 5 hours, which them trucks, I'm just going to throw this out there, was pitiful. They wasn't our trucks. Our trucks would run 90 miles an hour, theirs run 65, uphill or down. It made no difference. You ain't getting, actually, no, I take it back, it's 55. All you can do, hold it to the floor and hope something bends or breaks, or you can do something to get out of this, because it was miserable. But drive 5 hours in one direction and nothing ever changes. And so you drive and you go and you go and you go. No idea how far it is. No idea what the distance is. No idea. And so now when I used to be real bad to just follow the truck in front of me and hope that he knew where he was going, hope that he knew where the fuel stops was, hope that everything was going to work out. Till one day I was driving down the road, I got hung up in traffic, I go on through the light, look around, he's gone. I don't know where he's at. That was a little bit of a rough situation, but it was a wake-up call for me. I found out now I'm going to have a map. I'm going to have some sort of an idea of how far this is. And I'm going to have some idea of what I'm going to need for the trip. How much fuel, how much food, how much provisions, how much. He even went so far, Nehemiah, he said, this is a great distance. This is a great journey. He said, I've got a big job to do when I get there, and I'm going to have some stuff to take with me. And so he got to talking to him. He's asked the king, said, can you give me a letter to the man over there, old Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace? He said, which appertain to the house. And he said, I need all these materials. I need these things. I need to know where to get them along the way. I need to know where to stop, and I need to know just how much stuff I need. And I need to know that I'm going to have everything I need when I get there. When we take a trip, now, I don't necessarily just say, well, I guess we'll allow 3 hours to get there. I like to know for sure. And I don't know about y'all, but see, I'm still of the generation that can read a map. I don't necessarily believe that old girl that talks to me on my phone. Me and her, we have several arguments. I put an address in there the other day, and I was getting close. I said, I need to get me something to drink, get me a little bite. I pull off in the parking lot at the store. And if she said it one time, I bet she said it 10 times. Proceed to the route. Proceed to the route. And I'm like, would you shut up? I'm going, but give me time. But I don't know about y'all. How many of you have ever put that address in there? And it don't take you anywhere close to where you're supposed to be. Adam went on a joyride the other day. He went plumb out through the country. Said he cut off I-40 down there and then come back around through Cripple Creek and Ivanhoe and all the way back through Piney, come by Dollywood and then come all the way out to where we were. You got to know the distance. You got to know where everything's at. You got to have provisions along the way in these journeys. So you also got to know how long to allow for these. And I thought about that, and it come to me about how long on this journey we call life, and this journey where that we are serving the Lord. I want you to see what Isaiah says. He says over here, he said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, see ye indeed, but perceive not. He said, make the heart of this people fat, make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert and be healed. He said, then said I, Lord, how long? And he answered, until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. So what we find there is the distance on this journey. We don't know how far it is. We don't know how long it's going to take. We don't always know what provisions we're going to need. We don't always know where all the stops are going to be. We don't always know exactly where that we're going in this direction. We don't know. We meet obstacles along the way, and I've learned in life how to go around most of the traffic. I've learned how to get off on the service roads. I've learned how to go over here and to get around all this stuff, but we don't know how long this journey's going to take. But he said that just go until there's no one left to tell, until there's nothing left to do. He said you just keep going until I decide that it's the end. See, a lot of Christian people today have gotten weary in the journey. They've gotten tired. They've run into some roadblocks. They've run into some stopped traffic. And they said, you know, I'm just tired of this. I'm not going any further. I'm done. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go back to the house. And I'm just going to ride this thing out. But God don't expect us to ever stop and turn back. The New Testament is full of advice on that and some commands on that and about the fact that we're not of them that draw back is what he says over there in Hebrews. He said we're not of them. We're not the ones that stop along the way. We're not the ones that can decide when it's over and when it's not. There's a great distance that we're having to travel. And we need to kind of understand that. And see, we have to be very careful that when we're looking at that distance that we don't get put off by that. I know when I've been out there driving and it seems like you can drive all day long and you ain't no closer than you was when you started. It's easy to get discouraged. And you think, well, I don't want to keep doing this. Nehemiah, when he got there, he started to look around and he saw all the ruins. And he saw all of the things that needed to be done. And the journey didn't end when he got there. The journey ended when he finished the job. The journey ended when he was done with all of the building. The journey ended when he knew that the enemies wasn't going to be able to break through anymore. So there was a distance there. And we have to think about not only the direction, but we have to think about the distance. And the third thing that we find, and then I'm done, we have to know the destination. We have to look at the destination. Now, not many of us ever start out on a journey without knowing exactly where we want to end up. And you know, this life has taken me a lot of different places. I've been on some super highways and I've been on some goat paths. I've been in some places that if I could get back there, I don't want to be there anymore. I've been on some roads that made me car sick. I've been on some roads that were a little bit scary. I've been on some roads that I wished I had never got on. And you say, well, what kind of roads? Try Nashville in the middle of rush hour. There's some roads I wish I'd have never been on. There's some roads all across this country that I wish I'd have never been on. First time in my life I ever drove a tractor and trailer any distance at all. They throwed me in one in Galax and said, follow that man right there, and we're going to end up right out there in Memphis, Tennessee. This man drove a tractor and trailer for a living, a commercial truck. If his truck wasn't running at least 80, 85, he didn't think he was going anywhere. I ain't never drove one of these things by myself. And I'm trying to keep up with him in Nashville in rush hour. Wish I'd never been on that road. Looking back now, I don't know why I was on that road. I've been on some roads and some places that was so steep and so rough that I wondered if I was ever going to get through. Wondered if I was ever going to make it to the other side. I rode one of them same trucks down the road in New York with a man driving, 50,000 pounds of explosives behind us. He kills the motor running down the hill about like this. I said, Sergeant, I don't know what you're doing, but if you don't get this thing started and slowed down, I'm getting out. Road rash and all, I'm leaving. It's on you, big guy. I've been in some places, spiritually speaking, that I didn't want to be there. There's some places that I didn't like it when I got there. There have been some places that in this journey that I wish I could have just stopped and said, you know, I'm done, I quit, I give up. Somebody come get me out of this because I don't want to be here no more. And if we'll be honest, we've all been there. We've all been there. But one thing I can say is that I know the destination. I don't always know the distance. I don't know the direction sometimes. But I always know the destination.
Amen.
I always know where I'm going to end up. I'm going to end up in a place, the Bible says, is a place like we can't even imagine. It's a place where we can only just hope and we can just imagine what things might be. The Bible gives us a pretty good description, but I don't think that it really scratches the surface. Now, over in the book of Revelation, you can turn over to chapter 21. Now, I've thought about John while he was there on the Isle of Patmos. Thought about him a lot of times and about how that he got this revelation from the Lord and how that God showed him these things, how that Jesus gave him those letters that we went through a while back, and I've thought about how John described things. And I was thinking about how he described some of those beasts and things that he saw in this vision. And some of it just don't make a lot of sense. I have a lot of people tell me that they don't touch the book of Revelation at all. Because one, it's pretty scary if you look at it and if you study it out. But number two, there's a lot of things that you don't understand in it. There's some things that I still, as far as correlating the dispensations and all of that, there's some things that's a little tough to understand. But I look at the way that John describes some things in this book. And he talks about all of these different beasts and all of these different things. And he talks about this battle of Armageddon and all that. But now think about it and put yourself in his place. If you were living 2,000 years ago, that's before electricity, that's before automobiles, that's before anything that we know of today. How would you describe, if you saw a vision, if you were on this island and you were just there and you had this vision, how would you describe an army tank? Have you ever thought about it that way? How would you describe some of the aircraft that we've got today? How would you describe all that? Now, I could be wrong. These could be living, breathing beasts, and some of them are. But if he were trying to describe all that, I think he's going to kind of miss the mark just a little bit in getting us to understand what he's looking at. I think back about some of the things that were used 200 years ago, and how would I describe it? I'm just crazy like this, but you take our great-grandparents, some of us that never knew our great-grandparents. I knew my great-grandmother. She was born in the early 1900s. She died in the 1990s. But do you think that her parents, how would you ever describe to them a cell phone? Think about it. Try to describe somebody that lived in the mid to late 1800s. Try to describe to them a weed eater. Simple things that we use every day. How would you describe that to them? And so I look at the way that John describes some things, but I think about the way that he described this place, this New Jerusalem. In chapter 21 and verse 9 it says, "And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lieth 4 and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. And the building of the wall was of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth an emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth a topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, and the 11th a jacinth, and the 12th an amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did enlighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it, and the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. Now you think about that city. And just dwell on that sometime when you're riding down the road or when you're sitting out at the house. Just dwell on what a city like that must look like. In a place where there's never going to be a night. A place where there's going to be no darkness. A place where the gates will never be shut because we don't have to worry about the thief that comes in to steal, to kill, and to destroy. There's going to be none of that there. There's going to be a place where he said over there in the book of John, he said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. See, this whole world is not our home. Amen. This whole world is just a place that we have to make this journey. I like what I said there at the beginning. Made a lot of journeys in this walk of life. I've been a lot of places. But every time that I came back, I couldn't wait to get home. It didn't matter. I've left here in an airplane many a time and come back in an airplane. I've left here in all manner of wheeled transportation. But every time I come back, I think there's nothing like coming home. But the older I get and the further I go with the Lord, the more I realize that right here in Wythe County is not my home anymore. It's a place where I live right now, but I'm just passing through. The Bible says over in the book of Hebrews, he says, for we look for no continuing city. This is just a stopping over place for when I get home. And I think about that almost every time that I leave and I come back. I think about the journey. I think about all the things that's necessary for the journey. I think about all the plans that we make and everything that has to fall into place for the journey. But the journey is all about the destination. It's all about where we're going. Now, I like to think about what makes life interesting is the journey. Because along this way, there's a lot of sights to see. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of things that we enjoy. I've heard it preached several times lately that God's people ought to be the happiest people in the world. Amen. They ought to be the happiest people you'll ever meet. And yet we've let somehow or another, we've let the distance in the journey and the direction of the journey rob our joy, take our joy away from us. This journey, it's pretty tough sometimes. It's kind of scary sometimes. It'll put us in some places that we really don't want to be. But if we want to make it to the destination, we've got to make it through the journey first. And so this evening, my thought all the way through all of this today is the journey to our destination. I like it when that thing says, you have reached your destination. Get on an airplane and they come around and they land that thing, you have reached your destination. I like that. I like to think that when I reach my final destination, I'm going to hear those words that we've all heard so often and that we all long to hear. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful. I like to think that I'll be faithful. I like to think that this journey, with its ups and its downs and with everything, we went into that place our Sunday evening and I was beginning to wonder if we was going to get there. We just kept going up and up and up and it kept turning and turning and turning. We was all night near car sick time we got there, in my vehicle anyway. Of course, most of us was car sick before we ever left Wythe County. But I wondered if we was ever going to get there. But it was worth it when we did. And some days as Christians we wonder if we're going to reach that destination, but I can promise you it'll be worth it when we make it. It'll be worth it. And everything that we went through to get there will seem so small and so insignificant. It won't be a problem then. All those things that we stress and fret and worry about down here will be a distant memory. And in one of these days, we won't even remember it. Because he says he's going to wipe away all tears from our eyes. There'll be no more sorrow, no more pain. That tells me that in this low land of sin and sorrow, one of these days I'm not going to remember all this. It's all going to be taken away, because if I could remember it, I'd remember the sad times and the bad times and all of that. I could remember the bumps in the road and the traffic jams we've been in and all of those things. But he's going to take all that away from us. So as Adam's going to come and play, we stand to our feet all over the house.